Hey everyone, thanks for bearing with us for a second there. We were having a few technical difficulties getting started. Um, Super excited to have you all back here for our second day with Ideo. I'm going to do a couple of small introductions beforehand, and then we will go from there. So just a few things to note. I would love your opinions on whether or when we should close the merge request for the chatbots. So obviously you all turned in your chatbot on Sunday. We've given some feedback. You guys have had a chance to respond to each other. If you could comment in the lobby in the chat and let me know whether you think we should keep those open so we can continue the conversation, or if it's time to close those and focus our attention on the human-centered design challenge. It would be great to have your feedback, and we can do what feels right for the community. And then the other thing to know is that the deliverables and the templates for the second challenge are available on GitLab. So the instructions are the same as for the first challenge. You will find them in the Challenge 2 folder on Course Central under deliverables, and you'll be pulling the templates from the team template folder in exactly the same way you did 2 weeks ago. We will go through a few more details about what those deliverables are. Philip will talk through them a little bit at the end of this session, so you'll get more detail on that. But the actual technical aspect of how to do it is the same as last week, and you can find all those instructions online. And if you have any difficulties, again, you can be in contact on Mattermost and we'll help you, or someone else from the community will help you. You guys were really good at providing each other with support on that. So with those few brief announcements, I will turn it over to Ideo, who are back with us today to continue our work around human-centered design.
Great. Welcome back, everyone. I'm so glad we got 2 days ago and spent time with Tracy. Is the deck up? I can't see the unhung out screen, so I'm relying on you. Oh, perfect. So just to give you a quick recap of what we did yesterday, we are going to spend today solving a very specific challenge, but we're going to follow the same process. So if you remember, yesterday we started with empathize, and that was really getting to know or putting yourself in the minds and the eyes and the shoes of other people. Then we're going to do some quick synthesis and frame the question based on real human needs and challenges that we discover. Then we'll be doing some super quick ideation where we dream up wild ideas for ways to solve for the challenge we're going to work on. And then in your own time, you'll be doing some prototyping and getting some feedback from a variety of stakeholders. So we'll repeat the process that we followed yesterday, but this time we'll be using this question as our guiding question, which is how might we use everyday technologies as learning tools? And what we mean by that is we find that sometimes when we design for contexts that are different from our own, we dream up solutions that might be, unsuited to the users in that environment. So we want to kind of bring that down and kind of lower the barrier to access and discovery and create things using technologies that people are familiar and very comfortable with. So think of everyday technologies that you might use. It might be Facebook, it might be Twitter, might be a range of things. How might you build on top of that to actually build an innovative new solution? So I'm going to hand it back to Genevieve to introduce Mustafa and his colleague, and then we're going to take it from there.
Yes, so I'll actually flip to this photo. And Mustafa was just waving, but he'll be on in a second. So Mustafa Jazar is the founder of Lazer, which is a Lebanese NGO which provides scholarships to Syrian refugees who are living in Lebanon. And I'm sure he'll add more detail about the other things they do because they always have more projects on the ground. And Zaina is his colleague who oversees that project. And another thing they do, which I had the opportunity to engage with in a previous job, is they run teacher training for teachers who are working in the Bekaa Valley, teaching Syrian refugees there, Syrian teachers teaching Syrian students and helping them become better and more sort of responsive and accomplished teachers. So they have programs supporting the whole range of education for Syrian refugees in Lebanon. And so they'll have a lot of expertise to offer us on that. So I will hand it back over to Divya, or who should I give it to, Divya?
So Tracy's going to do this next part. I'm just going to share the screen.
All right, can you hear me? I'm going to stop sharing. All right, so just to get us set up for the interview, I'm going to ask that you find your worksheets that we sent you, and if you've got them printed out, great. If not, you can just take a look at what's on the screen and just write on a blank piece of paper. That's totally fine. So one of the things that we'd like to do, Divya and I have come up with a set of questions that we're going to ask Mustafa and Zaina, but we'd also like to pull some questions from you all. So if everyone could post into the chat one question that you're curious about when it comes to refugee learners in Mustafa and Zaina's context, that would be great. And then during the interview, we're going to talk with them for about 15 to 20 minutes. And we'd like you to take down notes. Write down what you hear, pay special attention to moments when you feel like you've moved into a deeper understanding of their hopes and dreams and aspirations, the challenges that they face, and you could write down direct quotes or just ideas that you hear, because you'll be coming back to these notes in a breakout room in about 15 minutes.
As you write your questions, okay, so take your time to get started with the questions. In the meanwhile, I can get started. So thank you so much, Mustafa and Zaina, for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here and tell us a lot about the ground realities. Could you both please give us a quick introduction of yourself and your relationship with refugee learning?
Salisa is a Lebanese non-profit that started 10 years ago. And we're working with refugees since the very beginning, since February 2013. We started doing camp surveys about at the university level, and we discovered very soon that we're gonna very soon be facing a catastrophe situation. So we tried to find funds in order to provide scholarship for Syrian students at the university level. I'm gonna go short. 2 years after, so we started to have it was the second year of implementation, and we started thinking about the outcome of the from my charges. Sorry, I'm not looking at the screen. So we started thinking about the outcome, and not only the fact of providing scholarships. So we started
Mustafa, I think, I'm not sure about everyone else, but I can't hear you very clearly.
After a survey and a study, we found out that is for the Syrian refugees for two main reasons. There is no Lebanese teachers and Syrian teachers.
Mustafa?
Until now, according to estimations that we had.
Hi, Mustafa. We actually can't hear you very clearly.
Can't hear
yeah,
me?
do you have a headset or some kind of like device that might help it be clearer?
It also might help for him to turn off the video and just use the microphone.
Can you hear me now?
I suspect that might be
Yeah.
Do you hear me?
Maybe you could turn off your video. Yes, and we just try that. Maybe that's a little better.
And off your camera.
Yeah, I think a lot of the people can't hear you super clearly. Could you maybe like sit closer to the computer? Maybe that would be helpful.
Do you want me to help while he's
Zainab, your voice is super clear.
already?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe while Mustafa joins again, or he gets a better voice system. Do you want me
Yes,
to
maybe
recap?
that would be really
project?
helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so basically, Mustafa was telling us about the project. I don't think my camera is working, right? But it's okay.
But you're loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. So basically, we started a project for scholarships for Syrian students who were originally enrolled in universities back in Syria when the war broke. And so we were the first NGO actually to act in Lebanon and to deliver scholarships for Syrians who were somehow left in limbo because they fled their country, they couldn't go back to education, and they arrived in a new situation where they can't afford to pay their tuition because there's a very different context and very different economy, and tuition in Lebanon is very expensive for Syrians. So they were somehow left in between. So with the help of scholarship, we actually managed to get in the first year 200 students, and so on for the next 5, or actually we're in the 5th year of implementation. So every year we take around 200 new students and they're enrolled in universities. There were actually many barriers to students going back to university. One is gap years. So some of them have been away from education for couple of years, so they found it more and more difficult to go back to university, whether it be psychologically or because they feel a bit ashamed or because they don't really so they don't really master the language, because there's a language barrier. In Lebanon, education is in English, whereas in Syria it was in Arabic, so there was this problem as well. Tuition and transportation fees and all of the logistical fees that they had to bear, which were actually out of control. Plus, they had to work so they could survive and pay for their expenses and even send back money to their families. So there were several setbacks or obstacles that they have had to overcome. By giving them scholarship, that was one burden solved in a way. So they went back to school. We had a special program, like special training, preparatory classes before they go into university, and it was designed in a way to empower them in terms of English.
Zaina, could I just pause one sec? Some of the participants are requesting that you could speak a little slower. We can hear you great. Just speak a little slower. Thank you so much.
Okay, sure.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry because I wasn't really taking a look at the conversation. I'm sorry, guys. So I'll try to speak slower. I'm just afraid I don't want to take so much time. This is why I'm trying to squeeze as much information as possible.
I know when you're excited about something, you tend to speak faster, but no worries, you're doing a great job.
Okay, so yes, we had scholarships for students at first to go back to university and continue an interrupted education. There were several problems in Lebanon in terms of equivalency, just to make sure that the documents you have back in Syria, they fit into the Lebanese system. A problem of actually making sure that the courses you studied back in Syria, they somehow are accepted in the Lebanese universities. And this is an ongoing struggle especially with the authorities, because if you don't have your legal papers, it's always an issue. You can't get really admitted into university. So this is that's one obstacle. Two, there's language. Yes, sure. So please interrupt me when you feel.
Oh, no, go ahead. I think you're on the right path. I think getting to know some of the pain points or challenges from the student perspective is great. And then after that, if you could switch to maybe the teacher perspective and what you imagine some of those challenges are.
Sure. So, so about the students, yes, there's always this language barrier, which we somehow managed to solve in terms of preparatory classes and parallel classes to their university. But still, access to English learning is always a problem, because what's given in universities is not really enough. And in a very competitive market such as the Lebanese one, where actually we're taught in English since we are 3 years old, Syrians cannot really compete in terms of access to jobs and being that fluent in languages. So this is a setback that more or less should be tackled more.
That's a really good point.
So,
kind of language learning in a new context is something that could be an opportunity for design as well.
Definitely.
What about from the point of view of, sorry, go ahead, you have another point.
And that's the last point, maybe, so I can give them ideas to think of. And 3 is the access to market. When I say access to market, is actually what happens when they finish their university education and they have a degree, which is amazing, but then what's next? So Syrians are not legally allowed to work in Lebanon in terms of access to public positions, and some of the professions are not open for non-Lebanese, so they can be doctors or engineers or pharmacists or anything. So this is one of the challenges, because students are studying in universities, but then once they graduate, they have to find alternative pathways to job opportunities. So either, okay, I don't want to give solutions. That would be the the assignment.
Yes, and you should definitely join, if you're there for the length of the call, join one of the teams and kind of help them brainstorm. But just to kind of recap, you mentioned 3 points. So the first one was around the language learning, and then the third one you mentioned was kind of understanding or helping students figure out what was next. So job opportunities, and kind of finding out what their next path is after that.
True.
So one question that's come from the group is how is the scholarship funded? Where does that funding come from?
The scholarships are actually funded from different organizations. Some of them are just from the Gulf region, organization interested or donors interested in supporting the Syria crisis. Some of the funding comes from partnerships with other scholarship providers, whether it be or just European funds. And the third part is actually from local universities who in their universities tuitions in particular. So it makes it easier for us when we have, so Laser is pulling funds, donors are giving funds as well, and universities are giving discounts more or less when it comes to refugees. So this is to answer Bob's question. Do you want me to go over the questions and answer?
I can pick a few questions, so you can focus. So I think one question is around the content of what is taught. So typically in kind of like the early days of finding a particular program, like what do those preparatory classes teach? Like what sort of content or subject matters are taught there?
Okay. So, and you're asking here about the preparatory classes that we offer students and not the university, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so we do have a summer program. It's a 2-month program where actually it started as an intensive English learning experience. So they have 120 hours of English. And that's because at first we thought that the English that they take in university is sufficient, but then it turned out that sometimes they do sit in class and don't understand what the teacher is saying. So this is why we thought, okay, we should do something in the summer before they enroll in university. So it's mainly English, but then we started year after year adding more components to it. One is the fact of doing activities together to build a sense of community between these students, because most of them are arriving admitted to the country, so they don't have any sense of community or friends, and they need to feel prepared somehow to go to university and meet people. So this is like a pre-phase to get them a bit socialized. Two is a set of soft skills, of communication skills, presentation skills, where because they have to present a project at the end of the summer school. So it just has all of the soft skills in it. And three, it has an academic orientation component to it, where students get to sit with specialists and they tell them more about universities, the credit system, the majors themselves, the job market. So it gets them a bit prepared to what comes after university so they can choose best the major that they want to choose. And here I just want to mention that it's totally up to the students to choose the major, unless it's a major we think that doesn't really lead to the job market. For example, the history. So some of them chose history just because it's in Lebanon, it's the only subject taught in Arabic. So it was the easy way out because they know Arabic, it doesn't have any English. So, but it doesn't have any job prospect after graduation. So we stopped funding this particular major.
That's a really interesting point. I love your point about how the preparatory classes focus on social and soft skills, which you kind of typically don't think of, but they're so important to being successful in the learning environment. I think there's a question that a lot of people are asking around how teachers are trained or how they're supported to kind of actually help students coming from, from different places.
So are trained. Yes. So I'll give it to Mustafa, teachers in general. So
are we talking? Hello, this is Mustafa. So I probably it's better. I'm gonna use Zena's account.
This is perfect.
Yeah,
we can hear you clearly.
Yeah, I hear clearly. Are you talking about teachers at the school level or at the university level?
I think if there's a difference, that would be great to point out. But if in general, what is the training that teachers get, especially if they're teaching students from a refugee context who have come from maybe some level of trauma? Like, is there anything specific that they're getting trained in?
Yeah, there is nothing specific that at the university level. All what is done in some of our partner universities is in two partner universities, they try to adapt their English language courses to the Syrian refugees level. This was 2 years ago, and we discovered that above the necessary level for them to catch up. So this is why we had to go into our own preparatory courses. So up to my knowledge, in all the Lebanese universities, they do not do any exception for Syrian refugees. It's going to cost them a lot. I'm not prepared to this.
And when you and what about at the school level? Is that look different for teachers?
Yeah, at the school level, it's completely different. What's happened is, the Lebanese Ministry of Education opened its classes at the public schools all around the country for Syrian kids to enroll at the Lebanese schools. Many of them in a second shift, say in the afternoon or the evening. Some of them, a small percentage, are in the same classes with the Lebanese. All of this is funded by big international organizations like UNICEF. But this has been proved to be completely insufficient. First of all, from statistical point of view, the maximum empty seats that public schools can give is 250,000. Need is 500,000. So there is only 250,000 possible classes, seats, where the need is 2 times this. This is from one side. From the second side, there is studies and surveys that proved that the dropout rate at the public schools is extremely high, which means that less than 3 weeks after the beginning of the courses, almost 70% of the kids will drop out.
Wow.
The main reason of this is the teachers are all Lebanese. They are here for a second shift. They are tired. They have already learned. We're teaching in the morning. They will teach in the afternoon. At all for the curriculum or the books or the activities. And the Lebanese teacher that is used to teach in English didn't try to make a step toward the Syrian refugees, to the Syrian language level, or even the change of curriculum or methods. What's happened since the very beginning, 2014, some of non-profit organizations, local non-profit organizations, many of them or most of them are Syrian-led, opened schools that are not accredited by the Ministry of Education, so we can call them non-formal education, that up till recently, the Ministry of Education didn't want to hear about. But estimations state that, for example, for the year 2016, non-formal education represented half of the kids enrolled at schools. For example, 2016, 2017, we had almost 150,000 enrolled in non-formal schools and 159,000 enrolled in public schools.
That's really interesting to kind of understand that there's a lot of there's actually a lot of students learning, but in this regulated environment, and what opportunities there might be for those students. I'm also curious to know from either of you, what sort of technologies typically are used either in the classroom or technologies used to connect teachers to students or the school to students, like what is used in terms of technology in that learning environment, maybe across different types of students?
Well, Divya, you probably don't know the Lebanese context and the infrastructure. Internet in Lebanon is very bad. I had to shut down my computer because the network didn't support probably 2 connections at a time. And notice that in here we have a very high speed internet connection. Many organizations tried to use technology for the learning process. At least logistically speaking, Lebanon is not well equipped. I mean, neither the 3G system is well established, or the speed is very low, nor the regular internet that we can have through the phone line is not better.
But maybe just to, but the picture is not really that gloomy. Maybe when it comes to students who are enrolled in universities, the situation is a bit different. So when I told you about the preparatory classes we did in the, or we actually do in the summer, 2 years ago, we started piloting the use of Duolingo, which is a very famous language learning app, inside the classroom. And we gave everyone access to internet to make sure that they do their share of Duolingo per day. And we asked them for a minimum of points collected, but it was more of a competition where actually the person who gets the most points would get a prize. So, and this was tested in 5 different summer schools across Lebanon, because we were operating in 5 different regions. And actually, some of them got to thousands, and even one of them got to 100,000 of points. And I do think this further proved the use of games, or just the gamification of learning, even for university students, and not only for kids, that can prove to be a success. And they really learned a lot, and they really acquired a lot of vocabulary. So this is one. 2 is an app that we developed in Laser, and it's called Connected. So Connected is an app that allows students to fill their application to the scholarship, and it monitors the status of the application, their grades, if they have payments to do. So we help them with scheduling the payments that they have to do. And it's one way of helping them just staying on the good track. There's always the use of social media when it comes to communication. And we have the ongoing, so we have the Facebook page with a badge that is always turned on green, because we do communicate with students. We have an officer, just their work is only to get back to the students on the inbox of Facebook. This is their work. So it's more or less seems to be a success, but I guess Mustafa was talking more about technology inside classrooms in primary setting, or the use of MOOCs, which up until now hasn't been really a success for refugees.
That's super interesting. I love the way of doing those examples will be very inspirational for the team here. There's some questions, and I'm going to wrap up soon, so these are going to be the last 2 questions. One, in terms of scale, when you're in terms of like a classroom size, how large typically can one course accommodate students? Like, is there kind of a shortage of teachers to students? Is that something that's perhaps an opportunity for design or solving a problem?
In a school setting or in university?
I think the context that you're more familiar with, so the university setting.
In universities, there is no shortage of teachers in a way, because there is like private universities and public universities. But I would say that if you would want to help, and here I'm addressing the participants, that it would be more for schools where there is a shortage of qualified teachers. There is a shortage of actually schools. There's a shortage of tools to use in terms of like learning about mathematics or sciences. And so this is one of the problems, because there is a shortage of tools. So teachers, they can do very little with getting the information through to the kids. And more and more students are dropping out from schools because education is not interesting, and and they're just in a class where they have to fit in like 50 students in one class. It's not there's no AC, there's nothing. So plus all of the other problems of transportation, safety issues. So parents decide to just not send their kids to schools. So with each year passing, we have more and more students either not enrolling in schools, or actually, if they're enrolled, dropping out. And so just last year, we noticed that we have a very little number of high school students applying to a university scholarship because actually increasing number of people going to high school. So now we're not talking only about people going to university, that is decreasing. It's going back year after year to the phase before. So we have high school and then intermediate and then primary, where actually all of the numbers are dropping because of the logistical, if we might call it, situation of a classroom.
There's one great question here that's a great follow-up to what you just said. How do you or you see other organizations provide support for students who have dropped out? Like, how do you help them get back into the education cycle?
Uh,
Or have you heard or seen of great examples where that has happened?
Actually, you might be surprised that students, even when they drop out of university, they still have it in themselves to go back to education. They usually drop out for all of the reasons that we mentioned: the language, the tuition, the living costs, and everything. Plus the fact that they have to go and work and support their families if they're married or if they support their parents. So they always feel like they want to go back, but most of the scholarship, they have a threshold in terms of age. They have an age limit. So I read in one of the comments about the usage of MOOCs, and it has been tested or discussed several times, but because of just the connection in Lebanon, the absence of moderators in a way, the commitment issue, it's not really being taken seriously. Plus the fact that MOOC can be a separate entity, not a part of a whole track and a diploma at the end. And most of the students, they want a degree to just increase their likelihood of getting a job or being accepted into any system. So maybe the fact of having or a certain diploma would help. Maybe sometimes just like the English learning, and it has proven to be a success because some of the people who gets hired and are Syrian, just because they're good in languages and they're good in business, they get somehow to find their way around NGOs or work with local businesses and go places. But if they don't have the technical skills and they don't have the language, that would always be a barrier for them. So I'm just giving you hints about English and just like technical training or business training or anything.
So lots of great opportunities all through the conversation. Thank you so much, Mustafa and Zaina. It would be great if you could still spend some time with the teams, drop in on some of the breakout groups, and see what ideas they're coming up with. I'm going to hand it over to Tracy just to kind of explain what we're going to do next.
All right, thanks, Divya, and thank you, Zaina and Mustafa, for sharing with us what's going on in your context. That was super insightful. So what we're going to do for the next 20 minutes is we're going to head to breakout rooms, you're going to join up with your original team, not the partner that you were with yesterday, but the original team that you're working with. And we're going to spend 20 minutes working through the synthesis and ideation phase combined. So you might remember from yesterday that synthesis means making sense out of what we see and what we hear to uncover opportunities for design. And it's really exciting because we just heard so many challenges, and underneath all of those challenges, there are lots of opportunities for great design. So the steps that you're going to take in your groups is, first, you're going to download your learnings. Then you're going to take some time to find some themes and some insights. And then lastly, you're going to craft a really good how might we question. So you'll spend 5 minutes in your group, and everyone just share some of the memorable quotes and observations that you heard from the interview. We heard lots of interesting information about the specific challenges at the university level, at the high school level. And what we want you to do is just sort of share with your group. This is what I heard. This is what I think is really interesting. This really stood out to me. After about 5 minutes, what you'll do is you'll move on to finding themes and insights. And really what you want to do is look for patterns and make bigger connections. Look through your interview notes, highlight some of those key learnings. You could really focus on like what's working well, or we heard a lot about what's not working well, or if there's anything that you heard from Zaina and Mustafa that really surprised you. And then after that, what you're going to do is, just like we did yesterday with the morning routine, you want to craft a really strong problem statement. We need to define what your challenge is. So for instance, Div, if you could move to the next slide. Just listening to some of the challenges that I heard, I just really wrote really quickly some how might we statements. So for instance, how might we leverage everyday technologies to build student soft skills? Could be an example. I've got one more example. How might we leverage everyday technologies to inspire young people, their families, and teachers to improve high school graduation rates and university going rates? So you'll come up with that very strong problem statement that really starts with how might we, and it could be to create or design or empower or enable. And then you'll fill in the blank with some sort of functional need that makes, and then you want to identify your user. Is it the university student? Is it the high school student? Is it the university college professor or high school teacher? And then you want to connect it to some sort of emotional need. That makes them feel empowered, that makes them feel successful. And feel free to write your own statement in whatever way that makes sense if this template is not working for you. So once you've got your problem statement, then what you're going to do is ideate. We don't want to jump too quickly into thinking about solutions. We want to sort of like frame the problem first. So you guys are going to brainstorm together. And these are the rules that we use when we're brainstorming. So first of all, you want to defer judgment. Like, don't censor yourself. Don't say to yourself, okay, this will never happen, or this idea is too silly, or this idea is too wild. Just encourage those wild ideas to come out, because you never know, there might be something underneath that. You also want to build on the ideas of others. A real good brainstorm should feel like everyone is sort of stacking good ideas on top of the next. Remember to stay focused on the topic. We have only a limited amount of time to do this, and we'll be calling you back in about 20 minutes. Have one conversation at a time. Really go for quantity. Try to get as many ideas down as possible. And don't be afraid to be visual. Even though we're on this online platform, feel free to take your own pieces of paper and just sketch out things that might not be coming to you in words. Maybe they're coming to you visually. And then what you'll do once the team has like generated a bunch of ideas, you will sketch out, just like we did yesterday with the morning commute, sketch out your ideas, share with the group the ideas that you generated, and vote on what you believe like the most promising 3 ideas are. Once everyone has voted, review what you have, and then what we want you to do is walk away with one main idea that you're going to take forward today to do for your homework over the next few days. So what you're going to do is head to your breakout rooms with your original team. Genevieve, you might want to pipe in here. I don't know if there's a good way to organize this, but head to your breakout rooms and we will call you back in 20 minutes. We will also sort of pop into your breakout rooms to just check up on people and see how you're doing and see if you have any questions that we can answer.
Yep, I would say just post in the chat and try and coordinate your team members there before you head into the breakout room. So that would be my suggestion, is identify one and post there. The breakout rooms are open, so go forth.
Hi, everyone. I hope that session went well. I know there might not have been enough time, and that is, it's just the start of this process. So make sure that when this session is done, get back into your teams and continue the process that you have been on. You can go back to looking at your notes that you took and look at some of the insights and reframe the how might we. We just wanted to get you started on the process so you know how to kind of take it from one step to the other, but make sure that you're spending a lot more time within your teams crafting the right how might we and using that as a starting point for idea generation. The how might we is essentially that. It's basically a question around which you can generate ideas so that you have a focus. So make sure that you're taking your time on that. This is just a sped up version of the process so that we can cover a lot more ground. So what I'm going to leave you with before we wrap up today is just taking you on that next step of the journey of how we might prototype and how we might bring some of these ideas to life in a tangible way. And I'm going to walk you through a few examples just to define prototyping as we did yesterday. Prototyping is really about testing your idea in the real world and hopefully getting some feedback. And what would be ideal is if you are in a context where you have access to an NGO or people who are either learners or teachers in the refugee context, go out there, show them the things that you're creating and try and get feedback. If not, also try and find other people who might be in a similar context. So you might find other kinds of teachers or students in a context that's difficult for them, and you can try and get feedback from them. So just to walk you through what prototyping could look like, there are a few examples that we'd like to share with you. So one of them can be a physical object. So you might want to create a new kind of device or a new kind of mechanism for students to learn. It could be digital, which I imagine a lot of you will be gravitating towards. It could also be environment. So you might imagine a new kind of space in which learning occurs. It's a centralized space, or it might be a new kind of online environment as well. And the last one is that it could be a service. So you could imagine something that has a way in which it's discovered. Maybe people pay a subscription. It could be something that they get access to in the learning environment. So it could be one or a combination of many of these things. So keep your mind open about what it could be. I'm going to walk you through a few examples of what a prototype might look like. And you might look at them and you're like, oh, that's like too simple. But that's exactly what prototyping does. The minute you look at it and you test it out, you can quickly see how it works or doesn't work. And it should be super low cost and low risk. So instead of putting a lot of investment in it. So this is a prototype, and I'm not sure if any of you can guess what this is. But this is a prototype that somebody on a team at Ideo made for a new way for the passenger seat to access technology or things that they want. So it's actually kind of a tray or something on a car, but they literally hacked it out of a piece of paper. And this looks like almost like McDonald's food packaging that they literally kind of stuck together in the front of the car just to see whether that sort of physical space would actually fit that device. So it's actually simply something that was hacked together with very little resources. Another example that I really love to share is on the right, you'll see a lot of different examples for what might look like, a different kind of pen or writing instrument, but this is actually a prototype for a medical instrument. So there was a big surgical team in the US that came to us with asking us to prototype a new kind of laparoscopic device, which is kind of doing very fine surgery. And instead of spending, millions of dollars actually manufacturing the perfect device, we tried out a lot of these very scrappy looking things made out of, markers and pencils and clay, and actually put them in the hands of surgeons to find out, how they actually held it, what is the angle that is actually comfortable, where did they need something soft. And this prototype was made out of stationery. And what this ended up looking like eventually, was a much more refined looking device that is, the next slide, is this. So this is what eventually that prototype that was made out of a marker and a stapler looked like. And that was how it actually translated. So you can actually make something out of very low cost material to test it out. The next one here is a very simple prototype, again, for what could be a screen or an app. And this is super low fidelity. You might even want to, try visually how, a service or a digital application might work, just using, paper and kind of sketch pens, just to kind of show the flow of that, and put that in the hands of people. So suppose you put this in the hand of a student and you're like, what do you think this is? And the student's like, oh, I don't actually want to do video because I would feel very uncomfortable, or the connection is like not great. So then you'd be like, oh, maybe that's not the right solution. But like just making something visual and lightweight and putting them in the hands of users helps you get a lot of feedback. I'm going to play a video now of another prototype that we made of an interactive kind of app that we had. So we'll watch the video. So you can see that this is an app where if somebody touches the screen, the person or the character behind the screen actually changes their dance move. And so this is an idea for an app that was like, somebody thought of, and they're like, how do we make this real? So they got somebody to do this, but how do they actually make it? You'll see right now. So what they're holding up is a large cutout and a person standing behind it, pretending to dance while somebody touched it. So it's just a large piece of paper with an iPhone printed on it and a cutout and a person standing. So with that simple kind of piece of cardboard, they actually mocked up what that app experience would be like. This is another example. This is another kind of way in which you can show like how an app might translate. So you'll first see the prototype and then you'll see the app that was actually created. So this is a prototype of a kind of app where a student can go on a journey. So they are traveling down this road, they can make choices, and they collect different things based on the choices that they make. And then once they go down that path, and this was the app that was actually created. So as you can see, it's kind of similar in the concept, but it's actually kind of just, elevated in terms of animation and the fidelity of the illustration. But they actually came up with the concept just using paper and a stick to like move the character around. So you can easily there are a lot of really great tools available online that might help you. So if you have heard of POP, which is prototyping on paper, you can actually make entire mock-ups of apps just using sketches, and you can kind of make hotspots for like different kind of buttons and click-throughs. So check out POP. I'll send a link in the chat over here. But this is another really good source. I'll send a link to this as well. And these are kind of quick prototyping tools for emerging technologies. So this might not be something you might use on this challenge, but it's a great set of tools for you to think of for future challenges. So if you want to create something that's perhaps in virtual reality or augmented reality, or Internet of Things, like you have a connected notebook for students, there are a great set of tools over here that might help you prototype those ideas in a very lightweight manner. So I'll post both those links. So yeah, Philip's just posted the link for the Medium article, and I'll find the one for prototyping on paper as well. So with that, that's the kind of where we land today. What we want you to do in the next phase is to really kind of take these ideas that you have, and these are the starts of ideas, and actually create the prototype by the end of the week. Think about how you might test that idea that you have in a very simple, low fidelity way, so that you can actually get feedback before you commit to it and make it very high. And sometimes what happens is you kind of create ideas in a lot of detail, and then you like fall in love with it, and then you feel very bad when they don't work. So the idea is to make it to a level that you're not so attached to it, so you can let it fail and learn from that failure. So feel free to use any kind of you can hack Facebook, you can like put something on Instagram, like you could kind of use any kind of everyday technology to help you create this, but put that out in the real world in whatever way that is. Test it with your friends and family if that's the the people you have access to, but really try and test it with real people.
Wonderful. Are you done, Divya?
Yes.
So I think big round of applause to Divya and Tracy and Mustafa and Zaina for all of their information and everything you've shared with us today. I'm actually going to turn it over to Philip, who's going to talk in a little bit more detail about the deliverables and then our schedule going forward. But again, I wanted to say thank you to Tracy and Divya, because you've taken us through a lot of information and given us a lot to think about in a very short period of time and very early in your mornings. So we very much appreciate that.
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome.
Philip, the stage is yours.
Okay, sorry, I wasn't sure. Yeah, thank you so much. I thought especially all the examples at the end were so inspiring, because often when we develop technology, we spend so much time fiddling with frameworks and software and building things where actually most of the work ends up going into stuff that is behind the scenes. And we find out that something doesn't work way too late. And so I love that you could actually test almost all of your ideas in a really simple way if you're a little bit creative, and don't start writing software immediately, which I think is one of the instincts of any software developer. Is first you start writing software, then you think about what exactly you're building. So yeah, thank you so much. I actually have a couple of things I want to run through very quickly. The first one is, if you go to refugeelearning.site, which is our homepage, Vahid has created a course gallery that has photos and lists all the teams and all the people in the teams, and has photos as well. And if your photo doesn't show up, it's because you haven't put it into your repository yet. During the first week, we asked everyone to upload a photo. If you want to make sure your photo appears in the gallery, just go back to those instructions and let us know on Mattermost. And I also invite you, if any of you are, I'm pasting a link here, any of you are interested in hacking on the site, or you don't like the look of the gallery, which arguably is maybe not the nicest design at the moment, you can all help make it better. So it's actually in the Course Central project. There's a subfolder called Public, and it has all the HTML files and the style sheet, and also a little script that builds the page. And if you have any questions about how it works, or you want to play around with it, you can either just fork it and send us some pull requests, or start a discussion on Mattermost. We'd love any help in making the site better. And then, so the deliverables, what Genevieve asked me to talk about, there's really two pieces, two steps. One is Sunday, and then all of next week. So by Sunday, we hope that you'll be able to kind of solidify which idea. I think we were hoping that you would get to an idea today. If you still need a little bit more time, that's okay. But like, pick the idea you want to prototype, and then build a prototype. So look at some of the materials we're sharing on how you could prototype. Pick one or pick multiple if you want to play with this, and build prototypes. So by Sunday night, you want to get to the point where you have built your prototypes, and then share photos of them, or like whatever is appropriate for your particular prototype, share that with everyone else. And it's the same process as last time. I'll put the link here, and it's also on the site, but kind of you essentially download the template files and then update them, and we pull them in automatically at midnight on Sunday night. And then next week, we're hoping to get you to actually test it with some real users. And real users, you can define real users to some degree. Ideally, it would be the kind of people that you would imagine will use your technology or your application, or that they at least have some similarity to them. But in some cases, that can be difficult. So I think the most important thing is that you actually get people to play around with your prototype, and you collect some feedback on what are their reactions, what is their response, how do they feel about the experience, what's confusing to them. And we can also share more information on how to maybe run some of those test sessions and collect feedback. So those are the two things. This week, we don't expect you to build a huge technology. It's really more about the process of coming up with an idea, building a prototype to test it, and then testing it and seeing how people use it, which is kind of the prerequisite towards building things. There are two seminars next week. One is with an organization called EDRAC, which probably most of you have heard of. It was set up by the Queen Rania Foundation in Jordan, originally as essentially an open edX for the Middle East. And they were hoping to translate a lot of the materials into Arabic. They've since expanded quite significantly and also made some changes. We have one of their engineers joining us to talk about one of the new platforms that they're working on, which is more targeted at educators working with refugee learners and other learners. But they've gone through kind of an interesting process to get there. And also they're a great organization to know and connect with if you're interested in just learning and refugees in general in the Middle East. And then on Wednesday, me and hopefully our friend Jackie from UNHCR will be doing a seminar where we look at some of the prototypes and give feedback to both the way you've prototyped, some of the ideas around testing, and we'll hopefully get you to give feedback to each other as well during the session. So the Wednesday session is really about getting more feedback to make sure that every team gets useful feedback to their work. That's it for me. I don't know if you want to close, Genevieve, but I'll see if I can reply to some of the comments in the chat as well.
Yeah, no, thank you, Philip. I think that's all. If you guys have questions, as always, we're on Mattermost. My one ask from the beginning of seminar was whether you wanted us to close the merge requests for the chatbots and be done with that and just focus our attention fully on the human-centered design going forward and this project, or whether people are still interested in looking at other teams' chatbots and providing additional feedback. So if you have an opinion on that, if you could post. I think there's a little bit of confusion in the chat right now about whether or not this is building on the chatbot prototype. It could if that felt like a project you wanted to take further, but it also doesn't have to. So with the chatbot, we very much gave you the how might we question, and we sort of directed you in a particular direction. And here we're giving you an opportunity to sort of broaden out and take what you learned from Mustafa and Zaina and think about a little bit more broadly how technology could be used to support refugee learners, how everyday technologies could be used, and to prototype that. So hopefully that makes sense. I will see you next Tuesday. Good luck, and we'll be on Mattermost if you guys have questions or concerns. Bye.